Today's AskReddit post: what do Americans think is normal for everyone, but actually it's not normal for anyone but Americans? Oh boy, this is gonna be a good one. Let's get started. Prescription drug ads encouraging people to ask their doctor about the drug being advertised. Toilet cubicles, where people not only can peek, but an adult person could crawl into your cubicle. There is so much space under the door. Forget under the door. There are like centimeters of space all around the door. We don't measure in cm here, we measure in spoons. When I was there during the last election, I was shocked at how phrases like "well, they have the black vote" or "the Latino vote" came up all the time on the radio. Obviously it's not racist, but it's just something that would never come up in my country. Like, why would Latino people all vote for the same person? Similar to this, in the USA 80-90% of the voters don't switch, which is odd to me. Most countries have areas that tend to vote conservative or liberal, but there's a lot more swing. Mostly in the US the ads are aimed at the 10-20% who will change their ballot. The other 80% who vote are locked in as Democrat or Republican supporters households. I couldn't imagine voting because we're a liberal household or because ethnic group X always supports the conservatives. The US House and Senate actually have less turnover than a lot of dictatorships, as people get elected in areas that are Republican or Democrat. Then they are pretty much guaranteed a win, as long as they don't lose their nomination or switch parties or retire die. Portion sizes. Bankruptcy because you went to the hospital, paying for a goddamn ride in the wee truck. People take Ubers to the hospital because the ambulance is so expensive. Think about that for a moment. This one is more on the positive side, because I think we could learn some from it. Talking and sharing your life with complete strangers. I have met quite a few Americans, so it seems the norm that you share and engage with strangers in public, the bus, train, parks, etc. And then you go on your way. In Denmark you'd be a freak if you did that. Yeah, for sure. We become very talkative when we are standing in long lines or on airplanes where the flight is going to last more than an hour, because it gives us something to do to pass the time, and you can also learn a lot from others' life experiences. Gratuitous violence and entertainment is normal, but show one boob and people lose their poop. I read an article last year about how in American Horror Story they played a 4-minute long scene of Lady Gaga's character slashing throats and drinking blood during an orgy, but the song playing in the background had the word ducking censored. American censorship standards are wild. Being legally allowed to drink only when you reach 21. Yeah, that's ridiculous. You can get gangbanged on camera or shot in a war, but can't have a lovely sip of beer for 3 more years. Insane. I've heard the go to war but never the gangbanged on camera comparison. That puts it in perspective in a very different way. I've heard someone say that we are the only ones who drink out of solo cups. Canadians do too. And in Europe when some younger people play beer pong they get them for authenticity. Other than that, yes, North Americans are the only ones as far as I know. Yeah, we use them for beer pong here in Europe, mostly knockoffs though, but that's just because the standard here is like 0.2L plastic cups, which are way harder to throw ping pong balls into. Generally you can't buy them as disposable cups in the supermarket though, and you have to buy some sort of beer pong set. Putting a ton of sugar in products like bread. In America, it's corn syrup. Having police patrol the school. My school has a security guard whose job is to make sure kids don't walk out the front door before the last bell. He's very nice. I think more non-Americans need to learn that this is the norm, not cops and metal detectors. Ambulance rides costing money seems pretty absurd to people from other countries. I've heard of people getting Ubers instead of getting an ambulance because it costs so much. Yeah, my roommate was really sick once. I got an Uber and took her to the hospital because an ambulance would have cost $1,000 instead of $15. A flag in every corner of a classroom, and Americans being very patriotic to the stars and stripes. Other countries barely give a poop about their flags. Also the weird brainwashing pledge to the flag every day from childhood. American accents. I mean, everyone thinks their own accent is normal, but I've met Americans who think that they have no accent, like theirs is the baseline somehow. It's a pretty common linguistic misconception in almost all languages that the people speaking the common standard version of the language have no accent compared to people from particular regions, rural pockets, etc. Every speaker of every language has as an accent. Something registers as an accent to you if it sounds weird or uncommon compared to what you're used to. Started this topic thinking of reality TV about paternity court cases with the little children present as a trophy for winning. But I remember the other day a Redditor saying they thought all schools had cops at school and it was a regular thing. I thought this could be an eye-opening topic then. Campus police is what got me. I imagine the protest students in Germany would put on if any kind of police would have a permanent residency at the campus. On small campuses they are basically glorified meter maids that scare off kids that are drinking underage or smoking weed. On big campuses they are real police forces that make a lot of sense because campuses with 20,000 students operate as their own small city with entirely different demographics to any neighboring area and their own set of pretty unique rules to enforce. As an American, I was shocked to learn that not every school internationally has a building cop. In Australia we have good old Constable watch us name come down like once a year to give a lecture on how drugs are bad. That's the only cops I've ever seen at school. American flags everywhere. I traveled throughout Europe and the Caribbean and I usually only saw their flag on government buildings and here and there. Whereas here in the USA the flag is like Frank's Red Hot. We put that poop on everything. Magnets, churches, cars, condoms, every front porch, and street lamp. Eureka. Some other countries do this too. In Canada for example they strategically put the Canadian flag and maple leaf everywhere. Even in logos for example. Canadian McDonald's has a maple leaf in its logo, and most of my Canadian friends had never even noticed when I mentioned it. In Canada the flag is so common it's even on the trees. Circumcision and medical debt. I mean religious or health related circumcision is a thing. But circumcision in the United States usually is done for no deeper reason other than it being normal. Back in the 60s/70s it was the norm in Australia too. But it switched by the 90s. Now you have a lot of dads who have no idea what to tell their sons. Non-necessary, non-religious circumcision. Oh, I forgot about that one. I'm so sorry guys. That is some weird poop actually. Is there a reason excuse for the practice? What is the point? Nobody benefits. Hearing an American refer to a penis as uncircumcised is like hearing a Frenchman refer to a nobleman as undecapitated. Willingly putting yourself massively in debt for a college degree. I come from a place with free university education, which has its own drawbacks of course. And the fact that you can make such a huge, life-altering decision at 17 is considered normal over there. That seems downright bizarre to me. Agree, this is ridiculous. Especially with taking decades to pay off. A lot of times that teenager changes their career path or doesn't even use the degree. My GF is 30 and still has $70k left. Just dealing with preventable and curable diseases instead of seeking medical attention out of fear of crippling debt. One of the biggest things I feel those against access to healthcare being a right miss is that there are so many little things that happen to people that if they just got them checked out early it would be a cheap fix. If they could take a little time off to rest after an injury or illness. Instead we just have people ignore small treatable issues until they become big chronic issues that require some form of regular maintenance or care. Being concerned when anyone speaks a language you can't understand. I live in India and we have 28 language here, with multiple dialects of each language. When you are 18 years old, you can be shipped to a foreign country to kill humans, but you are not allowed to drink alcohol. Putting your country's flag everywhere and on everything. A flagpole on your porch or car bumper sticker may be somewhat understandable. But it gets really weird when it starts popping up on baseball caps, swimsuits or underwear. I'm in Australia and Americans are the only ones do this, even all the way out here. When I was younger I thought they did it in case they forgot what country they were in. Suing for any possible reason. It's so common that there are commercials on TV and radio telling you to sue X company for reason. Lawyer ads are also very common because of this. We don't actually do this all that often. The general notion of a frivolous lawsuit was propaganda by corporate America to discredit those who had been seriously wronged by corporate policy, such as a woman who suffered serious third-degree burns from McDonald's coffee. In truth, those small-town law firms survive because often enough people are the legitimate victims of things such as negligence or wage theft and need these suits to in some case pay for medical bills such as in an accident. While on my travels I've noticed that Americans have a totally different expectation on what service you get in restaurants and cafes and poop in Europe. Like the waiter arrives at their table seconds after they've sat down and takes their order, and when he's out of earshot they complain about the bad service. It's like if they don't get the OMG how are you guys, my name is Miguel and I'll be your waiter this evening, and then have their water topped up every 20 seconds, then it's bad service. There's probably an enormous bit of selection bias going on here, since I haven't noticed the probably hundreds of normal Americans that didn't complain but duck it. As an American, the service in other countries can be a bit of a culture shock. Having to flag down waitstaff is the hardest thing though, because it's generally considered rude here. Pledge to the flag in class. When I first saw footage of Pledge of Allegiance, I thought I was watching some dystopia fiction. Like 1984. I attended a church rally in Austin, TX, on Independence Day about 15 years ago, and they did the whole Pledge of Allegiance thing. After the procession of veterans across the stage, the entire congregation stood as one and recited it word for word. Then the pastor gave a very political sermon. Speaking as a Scot, it has to be one of the most surreal experiences of my life. When I went to New York I was flabbergasted by the amount of people just loitering on the streets or having phone conversations that everyone can hear on the train, like NPCs from GTA. People outside of the USA don't hang out in public or let other people into their business on public transport. I managed to hear a woman talk about how her baby daddy wasn't going to her daughter's birthday party, and I started to pick sides in her personal life. While walking through Central Park I heard two friends with a substantial age gap talk about everyone in their friend group having mistresses, and they were trading information on the mistress facts each of them knew for their respective friends. I got invested in that one, so I followed them for a while, pretending I wasn't, because I wanted the tea. Actively avoiding healthcare visits, checkups, because if there's something wrong you don't have the money to pay for treatment and you'd rather just not know. Or because we get gaslighted into believing that it's no big deal or that we're even a burden for showing up to the doctor's office in the first place. Having only two parties, Republicans and Democrats. I know there are some smaller parties, but the system is stacked against them. The bipartisan system is messed up. The idea that Americans have a literal red versus blue mentality with their own country and are willing to pick sides so vehemently and aggressively boggles my mind. Having elections on a work day. We do that in the UK as well, but then there's so many polling stations with very short queues, if at all, open from early till late. It's never an issue. Driving everywhere. Visit the US and you'll understand why. The US is huge. I forget who it was, a British comedian I want to say, who said that Americans think nothing of driving an hour to go to dinner. But in the UK, if you're a 20-minute drive from your parents, you might see them at Christmas. Circumcising newborn babies. Yeah, where I live it's only Jews, Muslims and people who were born with medical complications with their foreskin who are. Only 30% of the world circumcises, and America is the only country to do so without religious reasons. It started here when a doctor said it would help to prevent masturbation. Now it's the norm. People actually judge you for not having your baby boy circumcised. Archaic, unhelpful standard units of measurement. You mean you don't like having completely arbitrary measurements like 12 inches to a foot, 3 feet to a yard, and 1,760 yards to a mile? 22 yards to a chain, 10 chains to a furlong, 8 furlongs to a mile. The enabling customer service culture. It's created excessive portions in restaurants, created Karen, gives way to a disposable attitude towards products, and generally gives a sense of entitlement where most people start adding it to their list of rights. Paying people less than minimum wage. How is it a minimum if it's legal to pay less than that? It's not. This is a huge misconception. If the tips don't reach beyond minimum wage, they're automatically given minimum wage. Tips shouldn't even be a thing in the first place. People should be getting paid at least minimum wage without tips. That's how it works all over the world. TV ads for drugs against opioid-induced constipation. It's apparently common for Americans to take so many opioids that they get constipated. Talk about dystopia. Gun ownership. I think better description would be gun culture. Lots of countries have gun ownership and fair bit of guns. But I don't think any country has a gun culture the same way USA does. Like in Finland. Lots of guns. Especially hunting rifles and shotguns. And pistols for hobbyists. But you really don't see or hear about guns at all. Calling a main course an entree. I'm missing something here. What's the non-American difference? Entree is French for entrance. Literally the starting point of a meal. It's usually an appetizer. What you guys call the entree is called main dish in English, plat principal in French, because that's what it is. Italians are even more straightforward, with first plate, second plate, etc. Since the term entree is an ambiguously French, it's a bit weird to see it used incorrectly like this. Especially since you actually have starters which mean the same thing as the French term entree. Mobility scooters. There's a giant woman with pink hair driving around my neighborhood on one of these in Berlin, Germany. I call her the American though. I made a post higher up, but as a 27-year-old who has flamingo pink hair, and also is an ambulatory wheelchair user, I just want to point out I exist. Some of us are just trying to get through our day without being yelled at for being too young to be disabled. Just to start to mitigate the issues in my life with nosy people. The idea that giving birth to a child is prohibitively expensive to a lot of people, one way or another. Most of the world does not have that problem. My son cost $8k after insurance paid their piece. $35k before they did. That's using insurance that costs $6k per year. School shootings. Never heard of a single one outside of the US. I'm not saying there aren't any, just not as much as the US. Well, there was that one in Ossetia where gunmen took over a school and held the kids hostage. The UK had one in the 90s and consequently made it very difficult to acquire guns since. I'm not aware of any others outside the US. Being obsessed over race. For the previous comments saying Americans are not obsessed over race and that it's a new thing, come on, you really are. Why is it then that most forms and surveys ask about ethnicity? Or that you have huge subreddits that are race exclusive, such as white people Twitter, black people Twitter, black people GIFs, etc. As a European, Spaniard, I can tell you that no other country is as obsessed over dividing everything by race as the US is. Having second mortgages on a house. Taking massive loans they can't possibly pay off and buying stuff with it that decreases in value over time, such as cars. In most of America, you can't work unless you have a car. I myself drive 35 miles to get to work. No public transit exists that could get me there. Not wearing a mask during a pandemic. In the Netherlands no one wears a mask, except in public transport, because you get fined if you don't wear it. Even in public transport some people wear masks on their chin though. In Switzerland masks are not mandatory in public transport but merely recommended, so only like 20% of people wear them. Not owning kettles and microwaving their water for coffee tea. To be fair, most Americans don't really drink tea often, and almost everyone I know that enjoys coffee just has a coffee maker. I've personally never seen anyone microwave a cup of water, and I'm American. Credit score. Wait, what? Other countries have them too, don't they? I live in Korea and I have a separate credit score over here. Cult-like worship of the nation? That the entire traffic has to stop when a school bus stops. I've seen this a few times on our Idiotsnkers, and there is always a debate about how it's not normal outside of the US. Well, there's a lot of idiots in cars in America, and there have been many deaths due to drivers ignoring when school buses stop to let kids on. Lady killed about 3 kids last year due to that. Bro, you actually watched the whole video. I'd give you a high five if I was a human. Make sure to click the like button and subscribe for more great content. See you next time.